All right. So here we are, Friday night wellness workshop. Tonight's topic, natural defenses. I'm Kraig Smyth, your host, my biz guide, Business of Being Human, the outdoor guide for your inner journey, and the business consultant for the business of being you. Yes, MJ likes those intros. So, still got a little bit of a cough, so excuse me. And hi, Facebook. Streaming on Facebook now. Lightly less formal than usual. My suit did not get done at the dry cleaners in time tonight. Natural defenses. This is the growth and healing show. The growth and healing, right? Growth and healing. That's what we're about. Growth, healing. Those things go together. Natural defenses. As you may know, I have background in fisheries, forestry, wildlife, and have a inclination to compare our species with other species on the planet. Isn't that unique and novel? No, not at all. It's incredibly low level, low hanging fruit. But I guess that's where they are. It seems like there's a need to help people remember that we're actually on a planet. Crazy, huh? Amazing. We're on a planet. We are an ecosystem. We're in an ecosystem. Understanding ecosystems is critical. Understanding how nature and other organisms around us help us understand ourselves. Key components. We have to actually understand life, just like second grade math, just like fifth grade math. We have to cognitively understand some things. We need to educate ourselves. And I'm talking in contemporary terms to understand, mommy, what's an ecosystem? You are one, you're in one. Understanding how other life forms work, help us understand how we work. That's a good lesson, and it shows interconnectivity. Nature's working. There's natural forces all around us that shape life on this planet. And challenge is one of them. And if we put ourselves in the shoes of whatever's going on to shape us, by understanding other organisms, we understand ourselves. Is a good, healthy, grounding, alignment process that's going on. So, good lessons of looking at life outside of ourselves. I always like to share a key understanding from the contemporary world of what they call natural sciences. And that key understanding is you don't understand an organism unless you understand the environment it evolved in. So if we're looking at our species, we need to understand the environment that we evolved in, which is natural environment. We've been species for, according to contemporary science, 300,000 years. This Homo species that we're talking to, sapiens, is definitely a misnomer and speaks to all kinds of narcissistic tendencies. But our genus, Homo genus, 3 million years old. So the vast majority of that has been in nature, hunter-gatherer, and only a few groups left off that in pursuit of agrarian interests only 10,000 years ago. So if you compare 10,000 years to 300,000 years or 3 million years, people have only been off the hunter-gatherer routine for a very short time. And a lot of subspecies of this species of human have only been off the hunter-gatherer routine, forced off the hunter-gatherer routine by the non-hunter-gatherer segment, demographic as it were, for a lot of times less than 500 years globally. So, and yeah, agriculture in various forms has been around for a long time, but not to complicate that aspect. That's not the main gist of the show here. I'm just going over some review, but understanding other organisms help us understand ourselves, and understanding the lifestyles other organisms help us understand ourselves. So imagine, if you will, put yourself back in time to a place where we were all hunter-gatherers and had to understand the life cycles of other organisms, and we knew them intimately and intricately. We knew what time this organism was maybe had less defenses up, right? If you're gonna get some honey, you can get honey in the hot part of the day in the summer or in the winter. Anybody want to guess when's the better time to get honey? Yeah, see, that's understanding natural defenses from other species. Big difference. If you want honey, highly recommended, try the winter time. These are important things to know. If you want to catch a rattlesnake for dinner, you can wait till the hot part of the day, or you can get them when they're cold at nighttime, or when they first come out in the morning. A lot of times. So understanding other animals' defenses helps us understand our own. So I think it's a good idea to go over some of those other animal defenses, and to understand that everything has natural defenses. Plants, all the animals, everything has natural defenses. So to understand what some natural defenses are, and maybe we can see where some of those things are similar to our own defenses. And that's the big question: is where are our natural defenses? Where are they? Does anybody want to take a stab at giving examples of natural defenses? Anyone?
Our immune system.
Yes, absolutely. White blood
I
cell
think.
system.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Bones healing, scar tissue developing. Those are all natural defenses. Our ability to heal in the physical, right? And same with trees and plants. Trees, if you cut them, there's a wound wood. There's specific wood structures that are involved with the healing and closing up of the wounds. Starfish, they regenerate whole legs. I think starfish can regenerate the whole fish, the whole being from a leg. Some of those animals, obviously worms, some animals are really super good healers. They can be missing all kinds of parts and regenerate. Snake tails, lizard tails. So if we think about our physical immune system and making it, what's that, Griselda?
Did I unmute myself?
Your audio is funky now.
Oh, was I off mute? I didn't mean to unmute it.
Oh, okay. Yes. You didn't have anything to say?
No, I just
Not at that time?
accidentally.
Okay. I'll proceed then. Going through our physicality, our physical ecosystems, right? Our skin, or if we get cut, we get scar tissue. Also, our scar tissue is stronger than our original tissue, right? So always making comparisons to, we've got a physicality, we've got a physical ecosystem, what's going on in the mental, emotional, spiritual ecosystem. That's where people are having challenges. And a lot of these things, there's flows both ways. We can leverage our understanding of our physical ecosystem, internal and external, to start to understand our mental, emotional, spiritual ecosystem. Definitely our mental, emotional ecosystem. Spiritual starts to get difficult. That's definitely an and to kind of feel your way through it. But a lot of people in contemporary society are struggling with their mental and emotional ecosystems. So that's the growth and healing part. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of areas to get hurt in our mental and emotional ecosystems. So we talk about trauma. This is a trauma channel. So if anyone is prone to being triggered, you might want to flip the channel. We get into anything like that. People talk about trauma, but what about challenge, right? We've got our natural laws going through. So there's always going to be challenge. We're always going to be hurt. People talk about, being unhurt, but we've only got here because we're hurt. Challenge and the challenge of life or death facilitates life. So those immune systems, our natural defenses, get stronger by what's the word I'm looking for? by being exposed to challenge, right? And that's how the vaccines work. We get, they actually inject a little bit of sickness into the people, and the people's natural immune system grows. So natural immune systems, one of the key things to natural immune systems is being healthy. So we've got our physical health. So super, super important. Got to have physical health. Physical health helps with mental and emotional health, vice versa. All these things are interconnected. That's an ecosystem, right? Our interconnected ecosystems from our four main facets: our physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and then all of our sub facets and all the things we're connected to. Understanding these natural laws, understanding how challenge works. Our scar tissue is stronger than our regular tissue. Same with if a tree loses a branch and the scar tissue comes around it, that can actually be stronger, and then the tree's more stable. So we talk about trauma and challenge, and that saying that, well, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. There's some truth to that. It can also kill you. But to understand, not to assign black and white concepts to everything that we're going through, and understanding the place of challenge. Always understanding these natural laws, and I'll go through them: interconnectivity, challenge, balance, ebb, flow, cycles, carrying capacity. Oh, I missed one. Sorry. Interconnectivity, sustainability is the next one. Then challenge, balance, ebb, flow, carrying capacity. All those are super important, but embracing challenge, we have to embrace challenge, right? And all trauma is challenge, but not all challenge is trauma. So if we're going through something extreme, we still have to know that there is a challenge there, that natural law is there, because we want to stay grounded, right? We want to stay connected. We want to make sure that we're not disregarding a huge component of life in general just because something's happening to us. Yes, not to diminish what's happening to us, but I'm speaking from a practical level. I'm speaking from a level of understanding how life works on this planet. We need to get this holistic understanding of how life works on this planet. Then we have a better angle to engage on. If we look at ourselves as a species, it's a lot easier to understand what we're going through as an individual, not the other way around. So huge, huge lesson in understanding our environment and grow and challenge, and embracing challenge does offer the capacity for us to grow stronger. Now, do we want to repeat unnecessary challenge? No, because there's cycles and there's ebb and flow. And I think a lot of the factors in trauma is sustained challenge and unnatural challenge. So when the organism, when a person's in a challenging situation for long periods of time and doesn't get a chance to go through a whole cycle, and rest and refreshed. So one of those key natural laws is the ebb and flow and cycles. So our defenses, keeping ourselves healthy, one of those main things is to make sure that we're getting our rest, make sure that we're getting an ebb time. Yes, don't just embrace challenge, but don't just blindly embrace challenge. We have to keep the other natural laws in mind too. So we have to understand where our natural ecosystem is and use our emotional intelligence to understand where we're at on an energetic level. So we are making sure that we get rest, that with ebb flow, we embrace challenge and then we rest. We go out and hunt and gather and exert energy, and then we come back and we rest and we feast and we replenish. So understanding this natural cycle is a critical component for our wellness and a critical component for our defenses, for our natural energetic defense to regrow and rejuvenate. So the first part is to limit our contact with unnecessary challenge. I mean, really, that's a big part of it. To understand where healthy challenge is, if we can engage ourselves in healthy challenge, if we can gauge ourselves with strenuous physical, mental, emotional, spiritual activity, like people have done in the past as hunter-gatherers for most of our existence. If you think about it, everything is engaged in the challenge of life or death on a daily cyclical level, right? There's all kinds of natural challenges. And if we think about all the other animals now, they're eating and making sure they don't get eaten at the same time. So the level of awareness that's there is quite a bit above the average human. And also, all the other animals on the planet can't just drive themselves to the nearest hospital. So the level of watching out for our environment, for challenges in our environment is important. And to see that in a physical level helps us see that in a mental, emotional, spiritual level also. If I've talked to you earlier, and this sounds like a repeat, yes, but it's an ongoing conversation, and it's a key to understand the awareness. The first part of our defenses is to not get ourselves in predicaments. That's the first part. So to be able to see where too much challenge is going to happen, to see where we're going to be doing what, taking unnecessary risks, putting ourselves at unnecessary risk, and especially putting ourselves at unnecessary risk when we're vulnerable, when we're in an ebb cycle, or when we're in we all go through our infant, adolescent, adult, elder cycles, right? We're all doing that, right? Tuning in with those inner components. I know everybody, in the true sense of the word, all going through that. We need to know when we're more sensitive, right? So then that's a good time to extra watch out. We're not putting ourselves in a place where we're more vulnerable, where we're more likely to get hurt. A lot of animals shed, crawdads shed, and they go through periods where they've got hard shells and then soft shells, and same with snakes and lizards. And if you observe snakes, if you understand, all those species really, but when they've just got done molting, when they shed their hard shell, they're very susceptible to predation, right? So think about that. When are we going through places where we're molting and we get really strong and we got our mojo on, and then whoop, drop off? that's life. It's cycles. That's challenge. Those things are happening in our energetic ecosystem. So look out for that. When we're in an ebb cycle, when we're in a place that that our energy is rejuvenating, where we're growing strong again, we need to understand that part of our ecosystem. This is our internal natural ecosystems, to understand what's going on. So think about that. I'll invite people to take that meditation of when a snake is shedding its skin, it's not out looking for prey very much at that time. It's hiding back under the rocks. Same with the crawdads. After they shed their skin, they're hiding back under the rocks. There's been studies done where fish prefer and can tell when a crawdad's got a soft shell versus a hard shell. And there's color changes. If you're used to seeing other organisms, you can tell where they're at, even if you're used to seeing wildlife. And if you talk to researchers that work with large predators, mountain lions, bears, especially bears, they get a sense of the bear's character, because they're all individuals, and mood. So understanding that everything's got a character, everything's got a mood, everything's got a time when it's more susceptible to predation, more vulnerable. So knowing when we're going through those cycles is an important thing. Now, how that works out in a 9-to-5 capacity, well, you're on your own there. But it's something to be aware of, right? First, we identify the challenge. So, do we get to go through our full cycles in 9-to-5 society? Yeah, depending on who you work for, a million other different variables. Sometimes maybe not so much. But the core thing is to be in tune with our natural cycles. And look for the little adjustments that we can make along the way. So to take that meditation and think about, when we've got that commonality, when we're shedding, when we're growing, because we're always going through these cycles, and as we're growing, a lot of times we're shedding unknowing and growing understanding. So a lot of this is our growing understanding. If we talk about growing understanding, I think growing understanding in itself is a really good example of a natural shell, right? Because growing understanding, that's our context. And I think there's natural boundaries with understanding, right? Boundary, shell, right? See the similarities there? As we grow, our understanding, there's natural boundaries, because if we understand something, then there's less and less place for disinformation to come through. If we know something, if someone says, hey, I caught a lot of largemouth bass just using a piece of corn in the yard right here, I'm going to say, oh, yeah, probably not, Or if someone says, yeah, I caught a marlin in the creek down there, I'm going to say, yeah, probably not, because I have that understanding that that's not what's going on. So the understanding, and especially when we're talking about human to human trespass, and we talk about the narcissism, colonialism, capitalism, what else is there? Racism, addiction, misogyny, all these human ailments, all these human sickness that's going around, that's highly contagious. If we understand where they are, if we understand what they are, then we have natural boundaries already growing, right? And as organisms grow and shed their skin, They're growing. The reason they're shedding their skin is because they're outgrowing their old skin. So they get bigger, and generally speaking, when an organism gets larger, it gets less susceptible to predation. And for a lot of different reasons too, not only just because it's larger, it's got a tougher skin, it gets too big for predators, but also everything gains intelligence, basically. Fish learn to avoid certain lures, deer learn to avoid certain areas, especially during hunting season. Anyone will tell you that once you'll see all kinds of deer and elk until hunting season opens. Then they split. They've adapted to that challenge. They've even all animals they adapt to conditions where they can be susceptible to predation. So to take these understandings of animals, right, and I don't want to get too much into it here, but to understand animals and to grow that connection with animals is huge, huge for growing our connection with ourselves. And if we talk about meditations, to be that snake that's shed its skin, or be that crawdad that's got a hard shell, and to understand these things, and so we can take those as meditations and connect them to our own growth and super powerful healing understanding about life on this planet and other organisms. And we can see where, oh, look, I'm like the snake right now. I'm going through this part where I'm shedding my skin. And so I'm going to need some rest time. And now, oh, you know what? I've built up, and now my skin's really thick, and I can go out and catch some prey, and then I'm going to rest. So understanding it, that's how natural organisms work on the planet. So we can learn a lot from snakes and crawdads if we pay attention to our own internal natural ecosystem and where our emotions are at. So we can sense where we're at. And it's just a cycle. People say, oh, well, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling this way, I'm feeling this way, and try to point to, well, I did this and they did this. And yeah, also there's just a plain ass natural cycle going on that everything goes through. So huge component to understanding natural laws and understanding that interconnectivity, understanding that sustainability, challenge, balance, ebb, flow, cycles, carrying capacity. When we talk about carrying capacity, right, carrying capacity is the capacity of an ecosystem to support the entire organism population. And that could mean a square inch of soil, or a square acre of prairie, or a mile of stream, and how many different organisms are in those different ecosystems, and what kind of ecosystem. Is it a desert ecosystem? Is it a rainforest ecosystem? Is it a Arctic ecosystem, an Antarctic ecosystem, an saltwater ecosystem? So many different ecosystems with so many different populations, but whatever they all are, all those populations have different life cycles and different lifespans. And so the carrying capacity in a natural ecosystem, this natural law of carrying capacity, has all of these different organisms on different lifespans, so they don't overwhelm the ability of the ecosystem to support them. So summertime is a peak time of what they call abundance, when there's lots of food available. All the bugs are out, all the birds are out. So the organism populations, the carrying capacity of the ecosystem expands, and the organism population expands. And in wintertime, a lot of things slow down. So the carrying capacity of the ecosystem contracts, and the populations of organisms shrink, and their needs shrink. So there's all this breathing ebb and flow happening throughout everything in carrying capacity. So when we're paying attention to our own internal natural ecosystem, to our own emotion with our emotional intelligence, we can feel where is our carrying capacity, right? How long can you listen to this guy talk about this shit? What is your carrying capacity? Some people, it might be 6 or 8 hours. Can you believe there's some people that'll listen to this for that long? There is some. Talk about outliers. Other people might be like, yeah, a couple of those things were enough for me. I'm going to go meditate on that and go to sleep. Of course, we grow, so we can increase our carrying capacity, right? The same way anything else increases. And the more we understand, the more we can understand. It's a nuance with the human mental ecosystem. So far, not really limited in carrying capacity. Our physicality limits it because we might get tired. We've been up all day. It's Friday night. Everyone's had a long day. 7 o'clock. Okay, here's some intricate conversation. But overall, when these understandings of how natural ecosystems work, how other organisms work, how we function, when we start seeing where all these things go together, it increases our carrying capacity, it increases our understanding, it increases our increasing our understanding is increasing our boundaries. So that's increasing our resistance to stress. It's basically building up our immunity to the toxicity common with our species in contemporary society today. See how that works? So we're growing. And by understanding these naturally occurring lessons in nature, and like the crawdad and the snake, we could see, oh, okay, so take that meditation of the crawdad and the snake and try to see if you can see where the carrying capacity on your mental and emotional ecosystem is. And then embrace challenge, try to extend yourself a little bit, but not too much, right? And sometimes disengage sooner and sometimes engage longer. That's how we grow ourselves. That's how we grow our own volition. That's using our own volition to grow and help grow our carrying capacity, which is growing our resistance to energetic toxicity, and just to have a better life in general. If we're healthier, when we're healthy, when we understand what's going on, it's a lot easier to flow through and just, kind of that duck medicine, right? Like they say, water off a duck's back. Just go through life like that. And when we understand a lot of things, a lot of where these human toxicities, these human-centric toxicities are, and how they got there, and how we can grow ourselves to overgrow these challenges, we can we live healthier lives, And so and then there's all kinds of animals with shells, right? All kinds of ocean animals have shells. All kinds of mollusks have shells. Sea snails and clams and mussels, and then crabs have shells. Turtles have shells. Armadillos have shells. Who else has shells? Anyone? What other animals? Turtles, armadillos, clams, crabs.
Have shells emotionally.
What's that?
People have shells emotionally.
Yes. So, shells. Shells are, and I think we have naturally occurring shells, but those shells can get cracked also. And just because we have a shell doesn't mean that we're immune. And there's a lot of conversation about the difference between walls and boundaries. I think a lot of people think their shell is a wall, or natural shell is a wall, but it's really a boundary. And has anyone ever seen a squished turtle or armadillo on the road? Yeah. Well, shells are good, but they're not good for everything. They don't mean you can just go play in the traffic. And a lot of people have that. They're looking at themselves from an invincible spiritual standpoint, but not really understanding our, mental, emotional, and even physical carrying capacities and limitations. People run through life like, oh, I'm immune, and end up being the like the armadillo on the freeway getting squished. And but boundaries and walls, I guess it's a good little refresher for that. Lots of parallels there. A lot of people, well, start from the beginning here. There's a threat. There's an instinct to do something about it. So there's a response, and there's an instinctual response to any threat. In human-centric terms, sometimes when there's trauma at a young age, and I always say the organism, but I'm talking about a person, right? The organism doesn't have the capacity to fully respond in a way that's going to fully address the situation. So our core self goes into survival mode. Our instincts kick into another gear into survival mode, and we have a tendency to block it out, and retreat. If we realize we're in a toxic environment at age 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, there's the wall, because the person doesn't have the life experiences or the conversational skills or the words to go through everything, and doesn't have the autonomy to actually get out of the situation. So a lot of people get stuck in toxic situations at a young age. Welcome to colonialism in America. Pause there for a water, let that sink in. So it's all that the person can do to just build this, what we do is we build this energy. We just put this, get away. And that becomes a wall. And then hopefully we get away eventually, at least physically. But of course the, mental, emotional is still gets trapped there. So that wall, we build a wall to keep toxicity out, but also it keeps others, to an extent, keeps other influence from getting in, but also it stifles our own growth too. And it's just what it is. But as we grow, typically, people go through trauma in their infant, adolescent, lots of times early adolescent stage, and then we get into our later adolescent stage and into our adult stage. We feel that that stunted development due to a hostile environment coming back, and that's just life saying, hey, you need to heal. You need to go back and suture up this wound. Basically what's happened. Trying to make a longer conversation a little bit short here. So, but we understand that, well, our instincts kicked in growing this wall, building this wall in a reactive state. If we say reactive, compulsive versus responsive conscious, these walls are built in a reactive state. But obviously we need to be in a conscious state. So back to the fast forwarding, where later on in life we've got out of our toxic environment physically, but still have some mental and emotional repercussions. So that's forcing us, life's just forcing us to heal ourselves, really, is all that's going on. And of course, there's so much understanding in that journey. Don't forget, the challenge of life and death facilitates life. Trauma always has challenge. Challenge doesn't always have trauma, but there is always challenge. And a lot of those things that we go through when we're young in toxic environments, then we look back, and those are times when we really engage in that introspection journey and understand ourselves on a core level. And that's a huge component to ultimately our healing and our growth, and growing a healthy shell, which would be a boundary. So when we go back and we understand what happened, and we can speak with ourselves, and when I say this is typically our elder speaking to our infant and our adolescent, put ourselves in that understanding position to say, oh yeah, okay, well, you did what you needed to do at the time, and absolutely something needed to be there. So now let's go back and let's recommunicate with that. Here's a classic inner child, recommunicate with that inner child and grow a boundary, and grow a healthy boundary. And a lot of times that's looking within ourselves and making sure we're not perpetuating that toxicity. Because unfortunately, the way pathogens work is if we're exposed to, if we're in and immersed in a toxic environment, there's a super, how many was that? There's a bunch. Super high potential that we're going to be hosts of that pathogenic modality, of that toxicity, and going to be perpetuating that onto others. And so that's where that introspection comes in, to make sure that we're not perpetuating that into others. And then we start to grow that boundary. And if you're here for the growing healthy boundaries talk, the first boundary we grow is with ourselves. The first boundary we grow is to say, oh, I don't want to perpetuate the situation that I was in. I don't want to be a shithead. That's the first part of the boundary. And in trees, there's 4 layers of boundary. And I would say that that's the first layer. There's an internal layer, and they get stronger. The 4th layer is the strongest. So think about our growing boundaries as layers, and putting on new skin and thicker skin. Growing that boundary with ourselves to want to heal, to want to curtail intergenerational trauma, societal toxicity. We have within ourselves as individuals the means to start undoing the societal toxicity. That all starts at home. All our boundaries start at home. And if we're holding ourselves accountable, then it's a lot easier to hold other people accountable. But the boundaries are flexible, right? The armadillo shell, the turtle shell, they're not 100% rigid. There's flexibility, and they grow. And those are shells that don't get shed. They grow with the organism, right? So if we're really going to get into the meditation, we can be snakes, crawdads, armadillos, turtles. We can have all those things in our energetic ecosystem. And I would say in those meditations, in our spiritual energetic ecosystem, we can be all of those things and have lessons for all those, and grow our understanding of those other organisms, of those other examples of what we need to be, right? when we talk about animals and relating to animals, some of them people, and it's not going to translate well if you don't know me, if you're hearing this, but people talk about animal medicine, and a lot of times it's super new age, and in my opinion, shitty. But there are real lessons from animals, and I think there's a part where we're supposed to have a connection with all the animals, every last one of them, right? That's interconnectivity, Mutakiase. Everything's connected. We're supposed to have a relationship with everything, all the animals, all the plants, all the trees, all the stones, everything. So to gather our information, at least do the best we can and try and, grow that. If we do the meditation that I like is to imagine that, we've got a stream running through our mind, right? And flow represents flow. And in our internal natural ecosystem, that combination of physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, we've got the stream and we've got leaves and, there's crawdads in the river and all these animals, have a time when all those animals that we just talked about, the snakes and the crawdads and the turtles and the armadillos are all in that ecosystem and get to know them and get to understand the different layers. And there's some animals that have shells that grow with them and some animals that shed their shells, and understand that and look for those points when we're going through life to understand the times that, this is part of my shell that doesn't get shed that I need to grow. And then here's part of me that gets shed. And then I'm going to be more vulnerable, and then I need to take care of myself more. Both those things are happening. An ecosystem, like we said, has all kinds of different organisms and organism populations. And within ourselves, there's all kinds of different ecosystems. Like we are an ecosystem. We're in an ecosystem with infinite grayscale diversity of interconnecting ecosystems and organisms. And within us, there's bone ecosystems and nerve ecosystems and blood ecosystems and skin ecosystems and tooth and eye ecosystems, and those are all interconnected. And in our gray matter, in our brain, the human's most important tool, infinite ecosystems going on there. So take a little spot out of your brain and grow an ecosystem that's got some of those shelled animals, and understand those walls and boundaries and the growth and that understanding, and invite you to have that meditation with those animals. If you have different environments that you go through in your meditation state, right? We're all going to different environments in our meditations, right? We're all going to cold and hot and salt water and fresh water and mountains and trees. We've all got a bunch of different natural environments that we're going to in our meditations. Yeah, of course. So question. So just, have an ecosystem that has some of these shelled animals in there, and relate to that, grow that. It's good meditation, grow that understanding of boundaries and growing boundaries, and growing our natural defenses, and understanding that everything has natural defenses. Where are ours? Where are ours? And relate to that physicality of ourself with our bones healing, with our skin that gets cut and has the scar tissue, and with our mental adaptability. When we start to understand a challenge, that we end up being less hurt by it, right? Less triggered. And when we take that time with ourselves and grow our relationship to whatever challenge we had, to whatever toxicities around, then we get to the point where we can talk about it more and more and understand it more, until a point that not only is it we can talk about it without it like bringing back bad memories and hurting us, but also that's that point where that scar tissue is actually stronger, and that's the point where our poison, what we say, our poison becomes our medicine. So the things that hurt us in the past are actually things that can help us in the future, and help us in the true sense. Us as in you, me, other people. So when we understand our challenges, there's always this cycle again, where there's a challenge and it's big and overwhelming, And then, oh, where's my artwork? I don't know if it'll translate well here. But we've got a challenge, and it's always big and overwhelming. And then we grow understanding, and we can see the solution hiding behind the challenge. I'm going to do it here. I don't know if it'll translate well. I don't know if it'll translate well, but let's see here. We'll just do a test. Can you guys see the circle? Can you see the circle? Bear with me. This is going to be worth it, I guarantee you. Unless my pen runs out. Bummer, my pen's running out. Well, I'm going to try it anyway. Can everybody see that?
I can see
Can you
it.
see it? Small circle, big circle, another circle, another circle.
Yep.
Okay, so here's us. Here's challenge. My pen ran out. So you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit. This is challenge. This is solution. When we first get a challenge, we're here. We grow our understanding, and then we can see the solution hiding behind the challenge. And that's how we grow. And that cycle, that's a naturally occurring pattern in life for humans. So whatever it is, there's a challenge. And, you know, it's like this. It's like, boom, challenge. Oh, okay. And we grow our understanding, and we can see the solution, because that's why challengers are there, is because the challenge is just the carrot on the stick. The challenge is supposed to engage us. That's why we have to engage challenge, so we can find solutions. So we understand the challenge, so we find solutions. There's an internal natural ecosystem going on there.
Kraig, your sound went way down.
How about now?
It's a little better.
Well, hell.
That's better.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you all hear what I was saying about the cycle of challenge, and that we first see a challenge and it's big and overwhelming, and then we understand it, and then it's just part of us, just like when we were introduced to times tables in second or third grade or whenever that was. Even when we were first introduced to basic addition, right? First, like, oh, 2 plus 2, I don't know, 20. And then after a while, you get used to it, you understand how it works, and then it's a useful tool, right? So all challenge has those components. And sometimes in trauma, it's a little bit more challenging to fish out the benefits, and challenging even probably to hear that for some people. But there's challenge there. There's always challenge there. And with every challenge, there's a solution. That's that natural balance. And that's how life works on the planet. So to understand these things is a key part of our healing and understanding, you know, well, natural defenses, right? So understanding the challenge is a key part of growing our natural defenses, right? I can pick up a snapping turtle. I know how to pick up a snapping turtle. I know how to pick up a rattlesnake because I understand how it works. So, good lessons. You want another meditation? What's the snapping turtle that you need to pick up? What's the rattlesnake that you need to pick up? Where's the grizzly bear in your life? What mood is that grizzly bear in? Can you understand its behavior? Can you understand what's going on in your life? To be paying attention to our external natural ecosystem on that level of understanding large predator behavior, understanding poisonous animal behavior, right? If you're in the desert, don't just leave your boots laying around. Scorpions like to get into that warm place. You got to hang your boots up. So there's things that you got to know that can keep you safe, and then it's just hang your boots off. No big deal. So to understand these things in our social ecosystems, in our societal ecosystems, what are these potentially hazardous entities in our societal ecosystem? What are these potentially hazardous entities in our own mental emotional ecosystems? Good things to identify challenge. The biggest key to overcoming and embracing challenge first is identify the challenge. So if we don't identify the challenge, then it's super difficult. You have to identify the challenge. Contemporary society is devolved to the point where it's not really looking for challenges. It's trying to do avoid, I think, the cognitive dissonance part. And some people would say like the ostrich hiding its head in the sand, which obviously is totally not respectful to the ostrich nation. But if something scary is going on, pulling the blankets up over our heads doesn't actually help. So we need to make sure that we're not pulling the blankets up over our heads. If we need to rest. But don't avoid challenge. Avoiding challenge never helps. Like I like to say, avoiding the elephant in the room only gets us stepped on and shit on. So, there's real challenges in contemporary society and contemporary human life. Understanding those is key. Engage in challenge. And then our natural defenses. Use some of those animals to help understand our natural defenses and start feeling for where they are. And also to get in tune with our own energetic ecosystem to see where those animals, if you get close to a rattlesnake, it's going to let you know, right? Where's the rattlesnake? Where are you, the rattlesnake, and your rattle's going off? And that's telling you that, there's a threat. So if you're the turtle, and you're going into your shell, that means there's a threat. So identifying these threats is important also. Obviously, many layers to the conversation, ongoing conversation. We always repeat these things because they keep coming back. And it's growing our layers. The repetition of these conversations, of our understanding, it's layers. It's like building layers of a shell, building a shell wall. Sorry, I don't want to use walls there, but building the thickness of our shell, building the depth of our understanding, right? The depth of our understanding, in a way, we could call that a moat. If we're an island and we've got vast water of understanding around us, it's harder for whatever challenge to get to us, and we can see something floating along on the water, right? So there's another good meditation, they say no man's an island, but we are and we aren't. But interconnectivity, islands are connected. They're connected by water. So, water is a good conductor. which if we talk about our social ecosystem, our energetic collective consciousness, that goes both ways. We can be overwhelmed by the collective bullshit narratives that are abundant, or we can give back, we can grow, and we can give back, and start to deconstruct a lot of false narratives through our own understanding. Okay, so here's a part of the show where I open it up for a couple questions, and then we'll go for another little bit and jump off the Facebook. Let the Facebook people go. So, questions? Anyone have any questions or comments at this time? Need something restated, reiterated? I was asked specifically. It was mentioned to me that I just went on for an hour and didn't really give anyone a chance to say anything. So now I started stopping and giving people a chance to say something. So if someone doesn't speak up, I'm going to start picking people. Anyone? Come on, volunteers.
I can comment.
You got something to
I
add?
can comment. Is it hard to hear me?
No, wait, I got you.
Okay. Yeah, I can comment. I'm just thinking about perceived threat that I had just this week, that went back about 50 years. And the response was about that old. And so, and it was just a perceived threat, like it wasn't actual. And so the same defense though got kicked up, and required a broadening of understanding so I could see a different path forward. So yeah, that was making sense to me, what you were saying.
Absolutely good observation. And whatever's happened, I know that that's a common thing. And I think that the question first is, did it happen? Did it originally happen from a real threat and now the threat's not there? Or the other thing is because someone had so many threats that they just made up another one because there's so many threats around. It's like, well, there's not a threat here. That's obviously there's got to be a threat there. Because people have a huge tendency to kind of fill in the blanks also. And it's like with what they have. If people are used to shit, then they just figure, well, shit goes here.
There might have been some of both, actually. Yeah, going on.
Yeah. But that's, that's paying attention to our ecosystem to see, oh, you know what? I'm engaging, and this is the wall part. When we build walls, we're stuck inside those walls, so we're not growing, we're not getting outside those walls. So we're perpetuating things that aren't there anymore or never were there and just, made up, but we didn't get a chance to get back in through those walls, right? So now what do we got to do? Now we got to break down the walls that we've spent so much time in and building up. And to a lot of people, that's scary in itself because it represents a vulnerability, and it represents taking away the security blanket, even though it's not really a security blanket, but it's what people are used to. So anytime taking away something that people are used to is going to be a challenge. So, to understand all those things and to look for those parts of us that are being recycled that maybe haven't been related to, right? We talk about our internal natural ecosystems and IFS, if we say internal family systems, right? Well, we've got all these parts, but a part of us that got walled off, we haven't related to. And so that's, I think, the key part for that IFS modality. And when we say infant, adolescent, adult, elder, is to make sure that all of our different, parts of us, parts of ourselves, are in contact with other parts. If we say we're not just a person, we're an ecosystem. And I say, we're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, infant, adolescent, adult, elder, feminine, masculine, both, neither, with and more. But all these different parts, they're all interconnected. So make sure that everything's interconnected, right? And it's that lesson of community. Be our own inner community. Again, the internal family systems. Popular psychotherapy modality, right, MJ?
Correct.
So, but the basic is to relate to different parts of ourselves. And if we look at that from community, if someone's struggling, we don't wall them off. We don't just, kick them to the curb, except in contemporary society that just puts people in jail. But point being, what we do is we take people in closer and nurture is what we're supposed to do. And grow that community and through that understanding. So big lessons there. Big lessons.
It was good to have that to come up to be healed. Usually when it's going to be someone else, who's on the receiving end of that. That's, unfortunate. But it does have to come up in order to get that broader understanding. Otherwise, it just keeps doing its thing in the unconscious.
Yeah, you actually cut
Comes
out
up
a little
again.
bit there at the beginning, but I think I know what you said is that basically it's uncomfortable to, if we say look for challenge and look at the parts that we might be lacking in, and it might be uncomfortable, but it's 100% necessary, because that part's not growing. That part's holding us down. If something's walled off, it's not growing. That's the outliers affect the average. And so if there's trauma, if there's unhealed trauma, if there's a part of us that's walled off and doesn't have relationship with the rest of us, then it's holding our entire being back and spreading that toxicity. If something's walled off, we talk about pathogenic modalities and stagnation. So if something's not connected to flow, if one part is like, we say infant, adolescent, adult, elder, okay. So if adolescent is walled off from the rest of the flow, there's going to be stagnation there. And then that toxicity is going to have a tendency to seep out into the other aspects of our entirety. So yeah, that's really, really important. I thought about something else there for a second. Now, see if it comes back up. Did anybody else want to add anything to the discussion at this time? Anyone? Griselda, you're always pretty yappy. You don't have anything to add? I can't hear you. You got all right. Griselda's multitasking. Thanks for being here anyways. Geez, MJ, you said something and I had another part to that.
I can add while you're thinking.
Mhm.
It's that I can tell you that times before, but the conditions weren't conducive to really seeing a bigger understanding. And so I think life gives us a do-over after a do-over after a do-over after a do-over until we do get that bigger understanding. So, if I didn't get it now, it'd come up again,
That's 100% good observation. Again, kind of funny. You're cutting out at the beginning of your conversation, then like your audio's cutting back. But yeah, this is Griselda's favorite part when we talk about challenge, is that if we don't address something, it's going to keep coming up. And that's, it's cool, really, if you think about it, because it's the universe holding our place for us. And it's like, well, it's holding in the universe, like, okay, just a reminder, although what we like to say is that if you get used to seeing challenge, then you can address it. And at first, challenge will walk by your place and be like, hey, hey neighbor, when you're ready, I got something for you here. And then if you say okay, and then challenge knocks on the front door. Hey, I know I saw you the other day, and I've got a challenge for you here, and just whenever you're ready. And you say okay, and you ignore it. Then the neighbor's on the door again. Hey, I know we've talked about this a little bit, and it kind of progresses like that. And then the neighbors, then the challenge is pounding on the door, and you're not answering, and next thing you know, they're breaking in the back door. So read into that what you may.
I'm grateful the universe doesn't give up.
Absolutely. And to recognize patterns and to look at, how fortunate we are that there are patterns. There's ways that things work. And it's amazing once we see those, then we can start putting the pieces together. The part that I was trying to think of is if we talk about narcissism on the core, right? Narcissism, ooh, that gets everyone's attention. Narcissism, scarcity mindset. When we did our narcissism, our 7-part narcissism is scarcity mindset, narcissist in the mirror, addiction, racism, misogyny, colonialism. But the first part to the narcissist is it's kind of a the birds are really active tonight. Can you guys hear them? The first part to understanding narcissism is it's a kind of maybe not super accurate in the context of someone being self-absorbed, because it's actually someone not engaging with themselves and perpetuating addiction onto everyone else around them. And what I mean by that is, if we all have naturally occurring challenges, natural frailties, we all have insecurities, we all have these things. So challenge, what it's supposed to be doing is having us engage them and understand ourselves, right? Doing that introspection, right? Doc, MJ? Yes, introspection. So we're supposed to, if we're paying attention to our natural ecosystem, if we're using our emotional intelligence to look at ourselves, to understand ourselves, and where, oh, you know what, I don't know if I can, jump across that river, or I don't know if I can have this conversation, right? So cross section into the narcissistic psychological profile. Narcissists can't have the conversation about introspection and about understanding personal development because they're not having it with themselves. So the narcissist is not relating to themselves, is not engaging their own naturally occurring frailties. So step right into addiction, that in the classic example of filling those internal voids with external things, materialism, classic, and then also substance abuse, anything other than what goes there. But the narcissist isn't engaging in that personal development process. The narcissist isn't engaging their own naturally occurring frailties, isn't challenging themselves, right? Oh, here we go. Here's where all the pattern recognitions, because narcissist isn't challenging themselves. It's what? Anybody? Yeah, challenging everyone else. Welcome to oppression. Welcome to the shitheads. They won't take any responsibility on themselves, but they're perpetuating that onto everything around them. They're not understanding their own internal natural ecosystem, so they want the construct is that man, my talker's not working very well. The construct is that they hijack other people's ecosystem. They're not working on themselves. They're not doing their own emotional wellness. They hijack other people's emotional wellness. They're not understanding their own internal natural ecosystem. They forgot their own external natural ecosystem. Why are people trespassing on the planet because they're trespassing on themselves. The narcissist, the first person the narcissist is trespassing on is their self. So when we talk about trauma and we talk about trespass, and especially for younger people that have been trespassed on, it's because the person that trespassed on them didn't have that relationship with their younger self. So our introspection, our relationship with ourself on a holistic level is critical for literally everything. If we have a good relationship with ourselves, we're going to have a good relationship with the planet, internal ecosystem, external ecosystem, vice versa. These things are all interconnected. So to understand that not doing our personal development in itself is contributing to the catastrophe that is contemporary society today. And we grow that relationship to ourselves when we engage our challenges, we engage our own inner challenges first, boundaries with self. So growing our natural defenses, right? The first boundary we make is with ourselves. The person trespassing on others, the first person they trespass on is themselves. And the narcissist is ignoring their own personal development. They're trespassing on themselves. That's why they don't get it. That's why the narcissist doesn't have empathy, because they don't have empathy for themselves. So growing our natural defenses with ourselves and growing our boundaries with ourselves through understanding is a huge foundational understanding to remedying, I'd say, 90+% of the challenges in contemporary society. It all starts from within. And last workshop was, what do we do? To always do your homework, do your personal development, engage those challenges of yourself, and grab some lessons from the animals and the shelled animals, and understanding and growing that context and growing that moat around our safety island and growing our layers, our shells, and understanding when we shed our vulnerability in where the ebb and flow is happening in our natural energetic cycle, and paying attention to our environment and challenges in our environment, both internal and external and individual and societal, on energetic levels, not just physical levels. That concludes tonight's broadcast. Kraig Smyth, my biz guide, Business of Being Human. This was Natural Defenses. Thanks everybody for showing up. And I'm going to let the Facebook crowd off the hook now, and we will go to the after party. If you want to hang out in the after party with the cool kids, then join us on the Zoom.